What's good, sports fans? Welcome to another edition of the Buffoons Sports Talk. I'm your host, Troy Alexander. I'm actually doing this episode solo today. Um, so I wanted to start out this episode by saying, first and foremost, I apologize along with the rest of the other buffoons for the lack of content the past 2, 3 months. I think it's safe to say COVID has been a killer, not just for the buffoons, but for pretty much the entire world. And it's been really hard to dissect any sport, really. And not just with COVID, but I know myself and the rest of the buffoons have been dealing with their own personal things in their lives, as well as myself. So with that being said, I look to continue to be putting more videos and content out for not just our followers here, but also wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, everywhere. So pushing all that aside and moving on, I don't want to waste anyone's time. Um, it's actually the 10-year mark 10-year anniversary of LeBron James' famous decision that he had broadcasted on ESPN. It was his own project, his own team, whatever you want to call it. And I've been listening to a lot of pods lately, and just they've been kind of dissecting it themselves. So I really wanted to take a little bit to tell you guys where I was when the decision first happened, what my thoughts were, how his decision not only impacted himself in being LeBron James, but the NBA, and just sports in general, and player empowerment, etc. So 2010, early July, I remember I actually moved that year. I was a teenager, and I moved to North Carolina, and I moved in like the beginning of the year, and then I was so homesick after like 2, 3 months. I missed everybody in Arizona so much, and so I remember I planned a trip out to Arizona to see my friends for the entire summer. So I planned the trip and I went out there around, I believe it was June till like August or something like that. And I remember when the decision happened, it was going to be airing on ESPN. And so I was actually, I'm a huge nerd. I'm a huge nerd myself. I remember I was actually at a card shop playing like, cards with people, and they actually had a TV and they were airing ESPN, the decision at the card shop that day. So I remember it was on, and everyone actually in the card shop stopped to like listen, because even though, myself, including more nerds in the card shop, were there, some of them still knew who LeBron was and, followed the NBA. So when he announced that he was going to the Heat, it was like, oh my God. Like everyone was like, the people that knew what was going on was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And I just remember LeBron like stepping outside of his car to like approach the broadcast, like just had like this, I remember this look he had in his face, and I was just like, ooh, I don't think this is going to be very good for a lot of Clevelanders and a lot of people in Ohio, because I don't think he's going to say the team that they're hoping for. And sure enough, he announced that he was going to the Heat. And I don't want to go into like details really about like, oh, there was this meeting and there was that meeting and he impressed this team, so they thought he was going there or whatnot. But I do want to talk real quick about the Chicago Bulls, because they, in a lot of people's minds, were they thought that they were going to get at least Chris Bosh, right? And the thing that no other team was able to do outside of Miami was give these guys 3 superstars. So at the time, that was unheard of. It was only 2 superstars. Every team was throwing, we're able to get you and someone else, 2 superstars. Pat Riley came to everyone and said, 3 is more than 2. At the end of the day, that's really what was the deciding factor. But really what wanted me to talk about the Chicago Bulls was, at the time, Derrick Rose was heading into his 3rd year. So that's really when stars, if Derrick Rose was a star back then, I don't think he was, in my opinion. That's really when stars take that next step and become a superstar in their 3rd year. And, Rose had some nice playoff moments leading up to that 3rd year, but he wasn't a superstar. But the Bulls still had Joakim Noah, who was still on a rookie contract. Derrick Rose was still on a rookie contract. Taj Gibson still on a rookie contract. So in order for the Bulls to clear space for Bosh, Wade, and LeBron, they would have had to clear out Luol Deng's contract, and they would have had to move more pieces around to get all 3 of the guys. And if you really think about it, like, that core with those 3 guys would have been extremely scary. And you can argue that one of the best arguments, in my opinion, of all time for the NBA is, could that team in Rose, Wade, LeBron, Bosh, and Noah have been more successful than that Heat team? Because part of the thing with the Heat of why they weren't as successful as some people thought they should have been, Dwayne Wade's knees gave out earlier than I think anyone anticipated. Secondly, the Heat didn't really have the room to make their nucleus younger. So they were relying a lot on older guys to get the job done. And when you have so many finals runs year after year, you need young legs. You can't just keep relying on these old guys. Sure, you can say the Spurs did it for, a decade plus, but Tony Parker wasn't always old. He was in his early to mid 20s when they were still winning their first few championships outside of that first one. So, and then you fast forward to their last championship, the Spurs, they had Kawhi Leonard, who was only in his 3rd year. So some of those championships were still won due to young legs. And with the Heat, in that first year against the Mavericks in the finals, they were relying on an old Eric Dampier, Joel Anthony at times, Mike Bibby at point guard. And I know that was partly because they really just didn't have a point guard at that point. Chalmers hadn't developed into that guy that they needed him to be yet. And, I think they were also counting on getting a lot from Mike Miller, who they cleared some room to sign too. And he didn't really give them everything that they thought that they were going to get from him. But I don't know. I just look at the Chicago team, and when you really break it down, you've got Rose, Wade, and LeBron all on one team. To me, that's a lot of ball dominant players and a lot of ball handling. I think what really attracted the guys to go to Miami was they didn't have to worry about another ball dominant ball handler next to them. Bosh was more so a pick and pop guy, a guy that you give the ball to in the post, so he didn't always need the ball in his hands 24/7 like Derrick Rose really was doing. So Wade and LeBron could control the ball more. And I think LeBron has proven historically, even leading up to his first year in Miami, that he's never really needed a ball dominant point guard. LeBron, he mostly plays point guard, right? He's a point forward essentially, and you surround the floor with shooters and you let LeBron operate. That's historically how he's won championships. If you look back to his Miami years, he's always had shooters around him. And you go back to Cleveland, J.R. Smith, Kyrie Irving, those type of guys all were able to spread the floor for LeBron. And maybe Rose just wasn't going to be a great fit, but it's just hard to not think like, man, like, and we know the type of player Joakim Noah became eventually in Chicago, who was Defensive Player of the Year, multiple All-Star appearances. So it's just, I mean, who knows what would have happened? Who knows the landscape of the NBA if those guys would have went to Chicago? But I do remember that following year, Derrick Rose, MVP. That team went 60-22, and Rose looked like Rose and LeBron were the best players in the league that year. And, and I'm not even mentioning like Kyle Korver, those type of guys that the Bulls had. So you really think about it, that Chicago team would have been a scary, real scary team. But I also think half of it was, I think there was two parts to it why they didn't choose, actually probably like three parts why they didn't choose Chicago. I think the first part, Derrick Rose with the heavy ball handling, and he wasn't really an established superstar yet. I mean, you think about it, if he was an established superstar on a rookie contract, and you could bring three other superstars to the league, that's four superstars. Riley was preaching the whole time 3 is greater than 2. That's true, but 4 is greater than 3. So if maybe Rose had established himself, could have been a different story. But anyway, so the Rose factor. Secondly, state income tax, right? Florida's got that. Those guys took a pay cut to go to Miami so they can sign all their other guys. And I think Riley said, you'll make that money back up with no taxes in Florida. I think that was very attractive. The third part, Chicago's already established, right? That's Michael's team. That's always going to be Michael Jordan's team. No matter what you accomplish in Miami, no matter what you accomplish in Chicago, that is always going to be Jordan's team in the 90s. 2 3-peats. I don't know if the Bulls could have done that. Probably not in today's NBA. There's so much more talent. I don't know if they could have had 2 3-peats. But even so, like, I just feel like no matter how much success those guys could have had or would have had, like, in the back of their minds, there's always that Michael Jordan factor. Like, it doesn't matter what we do, we're never going to do what Michael did. We're never going to captivate the city like Michael did. Like, Michael Jordan changed basketball. And that's just something that I don't think they could have stacked up against. And historically, Miami only had one championship in its history before those guys all got there, 2006, and that was Wade. So even though LeBron was the best player for the Heat in those 4 years, there was still a part of, I feel like, everybody that was watching the Heat that knew that was Wade's town. And even though Wade said, hey, I'm going to be willing to take a back seat for you, LeBron, and this is your team, Wade brought that first championship there with Shaq in 2006. So every time, even though that was LeBron's team, it still always felt like Wade counted no matter what. So, with that being said, like, there wasn't a lot of established history in Miami. So I feel like that big three in Bosh, Wade, and LeBron could really make that the Heat. And they did that. They did that for 4 years. Did they underachieve? Some could say that, but 4 straight finals, 2 wins. I mean, it is what it is. Sometimes it just doesn't work out, but as far as just the decision in a whole, like, back to basically what I just said, like, it changed the landscape of the NBA for for years to come, because we really have never seen and still haven't ever seen an offseason like that. Like 3 free agents signing with a team, 3 max free agents signing with a team. Like you see trades and stuff happen. Like for instance, excuse me, you see like the Celtics in 2007 did it, where they already had Paul Pierce, and then they made the trade for Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett. But it's not like you were able to negotiate signing those guys. You know, you got them in a trade, and it's just that's never really been done before. And you know, it's really changed the landscape forever. And I mean, going back to what LeBron really, as crappy as the production of the decision was, I mean, it was too long. It was too built up. I just think the whole thing was crappy. Like, that broadcast in itself really, I feel like, changed players' perspectives on, hey, like, it's not just the team's decision. Like, I have the power to do what I want. I'm my own person. I don't have to sign with this team just because they drafted me. I don't have to sign with this team because, you know, we built something here. Like, you got to do what's best for you at the end of the day. And I think LeBron really showed players that they have that ability to do that. I mean, you know, we've seen it with Kevin Durant in the summer of 2016. LeBron's already done it a few more times, you know, going back to Cleveland and going to Los Angeles. And, you know, it's not just that. There's been a lot of star movement over the past 5 to 7 years. You know, I can name a list of guys that have just decided to leave or want out as trades. And LeBron really shook the league up in 2010, and it's never been the same. And quite frankly, I don't know if it'll ever be the same. But man, the NBA is going to be starting in, hopefully there's no last change of hearts. Season will be starting in about 3 weeks or so, a little more than 3 weeks. But that was really my thoughts on the whole, the decision. Can't believe it's been 10 years already. I'm old. But hey, you guys, let me know, drop some comments down below. Let me know, where were you guys? Do you remember where you were in 2010 when LeBron announced the decision? What were you doing? Where were you? What was your life like? Tell me. I'm really curious to see your guys' remarks and your comments. So I'm Troy Alexander, and signing out for the Buffoon Sports Talk. Take it easy.